Office for National Statistics reveals pay has grown at the fastest rate in more than 20 years, but is still failing to keep up with inflation. The ONS also said that 843,000 working days were lost to strike action in December, which was the highest number since November 2011. Joining us now is Huw Dixon, who is a Professor of Economics at Cardiff University. Thank you for joining us here on BBC News. I mean, when you look at these figures and, you look at the headlines, what do you make of it?
Well, pay growth is starting to rise to quite high levels, 6.7%. It's still, as the previous speaker was saying, it's still below the rate of inflation, which is 10.5%. And it's a very heterogeneous picture as well. So in the private sector, it's 7.3%. In the public sector, it's lower at 4.2%. And, there's some people doing quite well. For example, skilled workers in textile, printing, drivers have got pay rises well above 10%, as high as 15%. Other places, it's much lower, 2%. So there's great heterogeneity in what's going on in the cost of living crisis. I think that wages, we are going to see a reduction in real wages, that is, our wages after you've taken into account the effect of inflation, which simply just reflect realities of what's going on in the economy at the moment, the rise in energy prices, post-Brexit situation, and so on. We're in a stagnant economy with little growth. We haven't even got back to our pre-pandemic level of output yet, and the forecasts of the Bank of England, etc., suggest that stagnation is going to continue into 2023. So we're going to have to wait at least a year or 18 months before we see growth coming back. So that's the sort of story. I don't want to be too pessimistic about it. I mean, wages will sort of catch up, but that's, of course, exactly what the Bank of England's a bit worried, that if wages rise by too much, cause more future inflation. And indeed, we are seeing that to some extent in the service sector, so that prices in the service sector, which are mainly dominated by wages, are rising by more in other sectors.
If you were hoping to pay your bills, where should you be looking for a job, public or private sector?
Well, currently the public sector is not doing too well. And certainly there are openings in the private sector, particularly if you have the relevant skills. But I think you don't want to obsess too much about what's happening now. I do think even in the public sector, wages will tend to catch up. This is what happens historically. So if you take a slightly longer term view, wages will catch up with inflation. But in the short run, it is a very difficult situation. Some people take on second jobs, do overtime and various things like that. Those are things if you're able to do it, you're able to do it. It brings more money into your budget and enables you to do something rather than changing jobs, which would be a lengthy process.
I can confirm that is indeed going on. People are taking second and third jobs. I've heard first-hand stories that is happening, and these are of people who you have said are skilled people, but it's something that they're having to do to pay the bills. When was the last time you saw something like this situation, this economic situation, so bad and so difficult?
Well, it's sort of unique. I'm probably a little bit older than you are, Chris, but I remember the 1980s, the early 1980s, but in the early 1980s we had a similar sort of problem in many ways, but we had very high unemployment. Of course, the difference with the current situation is that employment is still holding up, and as your previous speakers have said on the Pro Channel, the labour market's still tight, although I suspect unemployment will rise later in the year. It's not going to rise to anything like the levels we saw in the 1980s, when there was mass unemployment, if you like. So but I think you have to go back a long time, both in terms of inflation and in terms of the cost of living squeeze, to get a historical comparison.
Okay. Professor Huw Dixon, thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Lukwesa.